A lot of the time, video games are about the big picture, but sometimes you notice little stuff that you can't get out of your head. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 little details we absolutely love in video games. Starting off with number 10, when NPCs react to you doing strange or random things, like when you're playing an open world game or an RPG or basically any game where you're not just killing 24/7. One thing you end up seeing a lot of is NPCs, like normal everyday ones. In most games, they don't do a whole lot. Sometimes they'll talk to each other, but mostly they either do one thing they're assigned to do, walk around town, or run away if you try to attack them. That's all fine. But it just makes the world feel more alive and interesting when the NPCs are a little more reactive, like in RDR2. And bear with us, this game is going to get mentioned a lot on this list, where townsfolk will react if you're covered in mud or blood. It sounds like nothing, but it's so interesting to me. And also, anyone who's played Assassin's Creed 2 probably remembers the various things people would say when they see you parkouring around. They were almost as bad as all the beggars. Another game where more positive random NPC interactions happen is Marvel's Spider-Man, where people just stop you on the street for a picture or a high five. A lot more linear games do this too, like Last of Us, where your companion would get weirded out if you start doing stuff like shooting randomly at nothing. There's a lot of examples of this kind of thing. We could make a whole list of weird little interactions in games, but we'll stop here and say it's just always nice when the game puts in a little effort to make the people feel more real. And number 9 is pointless but cool or funny actions. There's only so many buttons on a controller, but we love it when developers let you do stuff that isn't strictly necessary, but just fun. Like being able to sheath your sword dramatically in Ghost of Tsushima, or twirl a gun in Red Dead 2 with the press of a button. They didn't need to do that, and it doesn't actually do anything for you. It's just cool. A more old school example is the context actions in the pre-reboot Tomb Raider games, where you can do stuff like dive into water and do a handstand when you climb a ledge. A lot of these sorts of actions are for making your character look cool, but there's some goofy ones as well, like the middle finger button in Far Cry Blood Dragon, and the duck animation in Shovel Knight, which literally makes your dude 1 pixel shorter, and that's it. All this stuff doesn't really serve a real gameplay function, but it adds a lot of character to the game, and while rare, it's always cool to see these kinds of actions pop up in games. At number 8 is realistic gun stuff. So many games have you shooting guns, but most of the time developers don't really put a lot of thought into making a gun function like it actually would in real life. Of course, obviously this is mostly to keep things fun, but sometimes when they go out of their way to make guns behave a little more realistically, it's really impressive. Any game that actually puts the effort to make the reloading function more like real life deserves some kudos. When they make it so you only cock a weapon after it's expelled all of its animation instead of every time you reload, for example. Or leaving a bullet in the chamber when you reload a gun with a full magazine so you have 1 extra bullet. Games have gotten better and better about this in recent years. We have to mention Last of Us 2 and its gun modding here. Every time you put a gun on the table, they remove the magazine, they remove the bullet from the chamber, so you actually have to reload that last bullet again manually after exiting the workbench. These little details make the world feel more real, especially if you're somebody with even a tiny bit of experience handling a firearm. And number 7 is different vocal tracks depending on if a character is exerting themselves or not. It's one you don't see a lot of in games because it's kind of a huge amount of effort for not a huge payoff. A lot of people don't even notice this kind of stuff, but for games like RDR2, they recorded 2 different versions of dialogue in any mission where you could potentially either be riding a horse or on foot, and depending on what you're doing, the game will switch between these 2 tracks. So many games just have people talking normally in an action situation or stopping dead in their tracks to chat, but in RDR2 they make it so the characters shout when they need to and talk normally when it's more appropriate, and it's a crazy amount of effort for such a small thing, but it's definitely noticeable to me. Another game that pulls this little trick is Marvel's Spider-Man, but depending on if you're chilling or swinging around, Spider-Man talks differently. Most people probably spend 90% of the game swinging around, so they're not really inclined to do a lot of standing around in the game, so maybe people don't notice the different vocals, but they're definitely there. Like I said, there aren't a lot of games that put this much effort to make characters sound and behave the way they would in real life, so it's pretty impressive when they do. At number 6 is realistic snow deformation. Ever since Uncharted 2 had Drake leave a trail in the snow during the opening cutscene, games have been trying harder and harder to one-up each other, creating more granular and realistic snow deformation. It's such a small thing that really doesn't matter, but it's something I can't help but keep an eye out for in any game with snow in it. Like this Frozen Wilds DLC for Horizon Zero Dawn. The original game had some pretty basic snow effects, but for the DLC they made the snow deformation so it stuck around forever and it will only get filled in after a heavy snowstorm. That's really interesting. And while that persistence is nice, accurate snow is even better, like in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Last of Us Part 2, of course, is a high watermark for snow effects in a game, with the snow that actually scatters and reacts to itself. It's especially obvious when you jump on top of a trunk in like the early parts of the game. This is something you can see in pretty much any game with snow effects, whether it's good or not, or whether it's like Last of Us Part 2 and it's incredible. And it seems like with every big new game, the snow effects are getting more and more realistic. And number 5, when characters' faces change when you're actually doing stuff. Like for most games, you're either going to be staring at the back of a character's head most of the time, or you're going to be in first person. So for a developer, there's not a lot of reason for a face to animate most of the time, but we love it when they do put the extra effort in and give the characters little facial animations depending on their actions. You can kind of trace it all the way back to the original Doom, where you had the guy looking in the directions and the little icon at the bottom of the screen. It's obviously a little detail. It's not that important, but it for some reason adds a lot there, especially since facial animation isn't really a thing at that point. But fast forwarding to Last of Us Part 2, where Ellie squints her eyes if you zoom in, that's pretty awesome. RDR2 also has characters squint, but they have like an even crazier detail. It's actually different depending on who you're playing as. Like if you're Arthur, he'll actually aim with both eyes open. If you're playing as John Marston, he only uses one eye. Like the different aiming styles, I think, are meant to imply that at this point in the story, Arthur's a more experienced gunslinger who can aim with both eyes. Even some first-person games do this, like Modern Warfare, where they actually bother to make characters squint while they aim. It's almost impossible to see normally, but it is there. At number 4, and I don't think anybody is going to argue at this point, cool rain and weather effects. If there's one thing we love even more than some snow in games, it's rain. Rain sometimes gets a bad rap in games, and when it's ugly, like what it looked like in the GTA Trilogy Definitive Edition when it first came out, it can make a game worse. But when the rain looks great, it can really add to an atmosphere. It's even better when they do stuff like make puddles evaporate differently depending on if they're in the light or in shadows, like Horizon or Spider-Man, or in Breath of the Wild where puddles grow into small ponds in heavy rain. I mean, you can even go back to the game Heavy Rain from 2010, or even further back to Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. The rain in the intro of that game is just amazing. One game I never expected to mention on a list like this is Homefront: The Revolution, which you can actually see each raindrop hitting. Rain like comes through windows and only get the area around the window wet. It's really impressive stuff. And number 3, journals that you can open and flip through. This is more of a bigger thing, but pretty much any game with a character's journal that you can actually open and look at is cool. And unless it's like in the Uncharted series where flipping through Nate's journal is integral for solving certain puzzles, most of the time these kinds of things are never required, and you never have to look at them at all if you don't want to. But they often provide a lot of background details and characterization you just don't get any other way. The protagonists of RDR2 and Last of Us 2 are really internal characters, so getting some insight into their thoughts is useful, especially in RDR2 where the journal really adds a lot to Arthur's character. It's not just AAA games that have these things in them either. Another great game with a journal is What Remains of Edith Finch, and the Life is Strange series has some form of a journal in all those games. They didn't need to add this stuff, but they did anyway, and the way it looks when you flip through it and how it's interactive, like even going back to the first Uncharted again, just having the ability to turn a page and have it look like a page in 3D where it's as real as everything else in the game, it just adds a lot. And number 2 is delicious looking food. So many games have some kind of eating or cooking mechanic to them these days, but it's amazing when game makers go wild and try to create this like really photorealistic, delicious looking food. You know exactly what I'm gonna bring up. The obvious, most memorable example of this is Final Fantasy 15. Some of the dishes you can get in this game straight up look like a photograph. The level of detail here is just unbelievable. They could have easily just put in pictures or used some artwork like most games, but they fully modeled these dishes and it's incredible. It makes us all hungry just looking at it. Yakuza, the whole series, loves doing this too, but if you want more down to earth but still great looking food, Red Dead Redemption is a great place to look. The Monster Hunter series also goes nuts with food. While it's not exactly realistic looking, it looks delicious. There's no real need for all the flash. At the end of the day, most players look at this stuff for a few seconds and then move on, but we love seeing good looking food in game. And at number 1, petting the dog. In the last couple of years, this has got to be one little feature gamers have gone completely mad over. If there's an animal in the game, the first thing everybody wants to know is, can you pet it? It's gotten so big that dog petting is like a feature in almost every major release this year. You can go totally wild with it, and it's totally pointless. Almost as pointless it is to try to list all of the games that you can do this in. The whole thing's gone so wild that DICE even made it so you can pet the robot dog with a machine gun for a head in Battlefield 2042. Like, if there's something dog-like or cat-like in a game, you can probably pet it. It's one of the most requested and most memed little details in games, and people just love it. You'd think it'd get played out after a while, and yeah, the frothing at the mouth will probably subside after a while, but petting animals in games is probably never going to go away. It's a good time to be a pet lover in games, mostly anyways, as long as you don't also have to blow away the same dog at some point. Somebody's going to do an old yeller though at some point. They're going to force you, and that'll be when people are like, oh, maybe getting this attached to dogs in games is a bad idea, or maybe not. I don't know. That's all for today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.